Wonderful, wonderful. Let's get into the conversation by starting with definitions. I'm a teacher by profession, so I love to define things. Let's start by defining what stress is. What is stress? Everybody's talking about stress, but what is it exactly?
That's a good question, Sarah, to start off with, because there are many misconceptions about stress. There are a lot of people listening to your show who may think that stress is good for them. And if I say to them, well, is stress good for you? And a lot of people would put their hands up and say, yes, Carol, stress is good for me. And I'll say, no, actually, you're not right. Stress is not good for you. So then what is good for you? Well, very simply, pressure is good for you. Pressure is what you can manage. Pressure is what gets you up in the morning. Pressure is what motivates you. So then what is stress? Well, very simply, it's too much, it's excessive pressure. So in simple words, you don't need many sentences about the definition of stress. Even as a teacher, we can cut that back to the chase and say, pressure is good for you, stress is not. That's all you have to remember. So a little bit of pressure, fine. A lot of pressure, too much pressure, tips you into the point where you're not managing, you're not coping, whether that's home or at work, it makes no difference. But that's the particular boundary that you're coming across.
And great definition, right? So then, has stress today changed post-COVID? We've seen the Great Resignation. I'm sure you know about the Great Resignation. Due to stress, a lot of people had to leave, their work. What are you seeing? What are the trends? Are there any changes post the COVID?
There are. I mean, COVID was a very difficult time for so many people, as we know, around the world. Everybody was affected in one way or another. So that was the shock and that was the challenge that we had to manage. And we did, and we came out the other side of it, albeit with a lot of learning and sometimes with a lot of pain and sadness that came from that. But your question's interesting because it's saying, are things different today, particularly post-COVID? And in many ways, it's the same, but in other ways it is different because we're having to manage things like hybrid working. Not everybody's going into the office. We're trying to manage this connectivity. We always need to be, on our phones the whole time. There's this point where, you feel that you should be seen on the phone or on your computer or on social media. So there's a huge pressure, Sarah, in terms of what we have to manage. Workloads are increasing. Managers don't necessarily know how to manage their employees if they're working from home. We'll come on to managers a bit later, the role of managers, but they certainly play a very key part in helping to reduce stress, helping organizations and employees to reduce stress in the workplace. So is stress different today? Yes, there are different stressors. Is it worse today? I wouldn't say it's worse, but there's certainly many challenges that we have today. But there were challenges 10 years ago as well. So is it different? In many ways, it's the same, but in many ways, there are changes as well.
So you raise a very good point around being online and connectivity, especially post-COVID, because a lot of people are working hybrid, like you said. What role does technology play in increasing people's stress within their lives, their workspaces?
It plays a very large role. I think it's because, this little machine, it can take me from here to South Africa in a second. We know that, it's wonderful. However, people are tied to this machine. People are tied to their phones. There is an addiction that we have about what is somebody wanting from us? What is social media saying to us? People are keeping in contact with their social media friends more so than their everyday friends who they see face to face. So technology is a phenomenal tool. And obviously with AI now as well, it's going to get more and more. And we know that. But there are people who sometimes are being left behind, particularly, may I say, Sarah, the older generation who may not necessarily be able to keep up exactly with what's happening. So therefore, they may manage their phones. Yes, that's fine. Then you start talking about apps. You start talking about, I want to book a train ticket. Well, you can only book a train ticket now. You can't go to the train station in London. Well, I think you think you can at the moment, but it's changing. If you go to the train station in London, in the future, you'll have nobody to speak to. You'll only have a machine. So that means they're taking away the human side, the human contact. So I know AI plays an enormous role with all of us, and it does, and that is the future. But we really must not forget the human contact, this eye-to-eye conversation, the kind of conversation that we're doing today is so important for us, for people listening, for people watching, and the future. And then take that on to the next stage, Sarah, which is, what about our children? Our children are being brought up to only manage this. They don't know really how very easily to do the eye-to-eye contact. They go out with a group of friends. You see them sitting around the table. This is them going out, all sitting on their phones, talking to somebody else. And the same goes for industry. If you're an employee in industry, there's this need to be seen to be there. There's this 24/7 connectivity. And that's what is there for people. There is this need to be seen, a need to do, the need to respond. And it's this 24/7, not literally, of course, but there is this expectation that people, that bosses may have, I'm only saying may have of their employees to actually be on their phones or to answer an email. Is it because they want to? Sometimes it is. Sometimes people think, well, of an evening, I'll just answer my emails, clear the desk. But they're not necessarily switching off, which is what, as a stress consultant, which is what I would recommend. So therefore, this 24/7 connectivity, a part of that is an expectation externally, but a part of that as well is what we want to do ourselves. So there is an addiction that we have to actually be on our phones, answer our emails, be on social media. Why? Well, FOMO, fear of missing out, maybe one issue, but it's not just that. It's also an issue of this continual bombardment of emails. You turn around at your email overnight, you close your email, 5:30. Maybe you've cleared the decks. And by the time you open your email again in the morning at 9 o'clock, you've got another 20 to start. And it's very difficult to manage those kinds of situations. So you have to have boundaries for yourself. So never before, Sarah, has the role of looking after yourself been so important, because the employer can't do it for you. Yes, they can help. So the employee needs to be open with the employer about any work overload, any boundaries they're not sure of, about lack of autonomy, about organizational change. That's what they need to be aware of and to talk about, which means the employer needs to have a healthy workplace culture whereby that employee feels open, where the employee feels able to open up and speak out to their employer. Because if you have a culture that's not healthy, where people feel bullied, where people feel unable to speak up and speak out, then you're going to have a situation where employees will not open up to their employers. So there is a dual responsibility here for the employer and the employee together. The key is the manager. The key is listening to your employee. And the key is having a healthy workplace culture and shouting that from the treetops.
Excellent tips that you bring to the fore, and this is a very, very important conversation. And you have touched on culture and the responsibility of the employer. I would love us to bring some skill sets for the employees themselves. If you're in a toxic environment, how do you handle this situation where the boundaries of working are now almost blurred? At any given point, you've got that email, and the expectation is that you've got to respond now. And people have got to see you that you're online. Otherwise, people think you're not working. What should employees be doing to bring balance within their lives?